Hello and welcome to the Crux of Medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the Crux of Medtech. Hello, Sabine, and welcome to the Crux of Medtech podcast.
Hi, Henry. Very nice to be here.
Indeed. So always like to start off with a bit of background on the guest we're speaking to. So this time I'd like to really dive into how did you get into the industry? How did you get into the world of work? What was the first experiences for you?
Yeah, so when I start very early on, I grew up in a super small village in Western Germany, not far from Bonn, the former capital. And my childhood was just like picture perfect, right? It was like quiet, safe, more cows than people, great memories. And all of that was perfect. But I did know early on one day I would have to leave that picture perfect spot and kind of move on. And I think it was very driven by my father, who was like 27 years old and had two small children and had to take a leap of faith when the company that had just hired him was on the brink of bankruptcy. And he then, through grit and determination, he transformed it into this really thriving moving business. And that entrepreneurial spirit was not just something I admired. I really became a blueprint for me, how I think, I work, I lead. And it was very determining for my life and how I felt. And on top of this, I think I had the real big gift of my parents giving me something very unique, which is the belief that, you know, if you really truly want something, you can do it and you can become anything you want. So they encouraged me very much to like pursue education. And I remember my dad often saying, look, you know, I make money with my hands, which is fine, but making money with your brain is much easier. So that mindset shaped me, you know, and I never questioned whether I could. I simply was going on and on and on and driven by that vision that anything is possible. So I think that was really fundamental for me in my life story. And so when you ask me, you know, how did I get into this industry? I studied business administration, and then I came to a research center where the purpose was to have these different scientists that would come together and build a company. Well, scientists normally are not so much driven by the idea of founding something. So I was there to help them to bring things together, to bring the money together. And at 27, just like my dad, I founded my first medtech company, which was a biosensor startup. And we basically simply ran into it by winning this business prize contest. And they gave us 50,000 euros. And we were kind of stuck, you know, having to do this, which was great. And it was the ultimate crash course in entrepreneurship.
Amazing. So what did you study at university? Like, were you the business person, the science person? Like, what was your role in the company when you founded it?
Yeah, so I studied business administration. I did an MBA in finance entrepreneurship. So I was more on the number side. And so that's what I brought in. So all the financing part. And I had a scientist who was the co-founder. And so that experience was just so shaping. I learned like from everything from scratch, from accounting to sales to managing people, right? I mean, managing people is just such a job in itself. And being at young age, you learn a lot about people and about what drives them. It was very intense. We had lots of sleepless nights and moments of doubt, and I lost my hearing at one point because it was so much, you know, so intense.
Yeah.
But it was also so invigorating. You did something, you were building something, you brought something to the market, you sold it, you had the customers. So that was all a really great experience.
Absolutely. So how did you find yourself in a scientific company? Like, how did you meet a scientist who actually found a business and finance background? How do you then find a science company? Like, where did the link come there?
Yeah, so in that research center, there were all these different scientists, and they were asked to kind of group together and think about business ideas. And one of them was this biosensor company, or like say project, which then came together, and we brought it together through the business plan contest that we won, and then spun it out and created this company.
Okay. Cool. So you created the company. Like, talk me through the journey. So you won this €50,000 prize, and you had to build a company. What kind of the steps that you took from there? How did that go along the journey, and what were the key things that was what happened after €50,000 basically?
Yeah. So Henry, I can tell you, it was not a straight line. So we founded this company. We had like 4 or 5 people. We started on the journey. And we early on partnered together with a Swedish company, in fact. But this company was listed on a small stock exchange in Sweden, and then kind of got a bit into trouble. And basically, they wanted to get the technology out without having to finance the company in Germany further. So we, before I was 30, we basically put this company into bankruptcy to change the shareholder structure, which was a journey, and that's when I had my hearing loss.
Okay. Yeah.
It was quite bold to do that, and not just to give in and give them the technology, hand them the technology and walk away.
Yeah.
So, you have then the insolvency administrator and so on, but he understood the dynamics and was very good about it. And he kind of kept that relation going. And we went out to find new investors, which we then found, and restarted the whole company. So that was then the second stage of this, where we then were not with a partner, but really on our own developing this biosensor, which then eventually 3 years later got sold to another company, actually here in Munich, where I live.
Okay, awesome. So in that kind of 3-year period, bankrupt the company, turn it around, get new investors, new finance into sale. Like, just talk me through that journey. How do you go on that journey? That's like quite a big gap between bankruptcy, insolvency, get some new finance, and then sell it. So just talk me through the steps that you guys took to get it from, well, basically a shell and turn it into an acquirable business.
Yeah, so we had the technology, and then, but the piece was then to go commercial, which was an interesting learning. And it was a learning where I didn't understand first, as a managing director, your primary task is to make money, right? I mean, to do the revenue. I was like doing the administration and taking care of the people and the bills and whatever. And then one day I was sitting in this board meeting, and they told me, look, I mean, it's you, right? You need to drive sales. I was like, oh, okay. And that day, I remember it vividly. It was like, okay, I need to do this. And I sat down and I made this plan, and we were like, okay, we need to do this and that, and we need to bring this together. And that's when I actually fell in love on the commercial side. So, I mean, I'm a finance person, but I'm very commercially driven. I love sales and bringing this together and being with the customer, being with the different stakeholders. So we were able to bring sales into the company, and from there, actually, it then went into being sold.
Okay, awesome. So after that experience, then Biosensor, you've had your first company acquired. You moved on to a company called Saw Instruments as managing director. So the company was sold through that acquisition. You then decided to leave, or like what was the journey into Saw?
Yeah, so Saw was the name of the company that then gets sold after the insolvency.
Okay.
So the company was first called Biosensor, went into insolvency, then was called Saw Instruments, same company, just
okay, got it.
wow, and then got sold off. And that's and then I actually did something interesting, which is that I thought the idea of a more conventional life would be just very suitable for me.
Okay.
And I joined a biotech company, big biotech company. And I was thinking, maybe that 8 to 5 rhythm would suit me very well. And the day I walked in my office where I was supposed to sit as like a product manager for a very fancy product, I knew it was a mistake. And, the people were so lovely. The company was solid, but it wasn't just me. I didn't feel fulfilled.
No.
But I did meet incredible individuals, whom I actually hired some of them later in my life then as the CEO of Occlutech. That has been great. And, a nice story from that. I was just there for 3 months because I very quickly realized I wasn't there, but I went to a global sales meeting, and there was like this room full of people that got to understand the latest and greatest. And I was supposed to give this presentation about the product. And, I kind of felt this room was getting tired. They've heard thousands of slides. So they had been tortured all day. And I kind of said, on the spot, I decided to ditch the traditional slide deck. And so I walked on the stage with like this one slide, and it had like one image on it, and it was a condom.
Okay.
And the whole room was like, what is she doing? But I felt like my message was safety first, because this instrument was about safety. So I kind of decided, okay, there's nothing about more words now to spend. I just give like one picture, and of course it was like very bold and unexpected, and I got in big trouble, but it didn't matter. Actually, 10 years later, I met people that said, oh, you were the one with that presentation we still remember today. So I got out of it what I wanted. I had nothing to lose. That was the experience.
I love that. So there's a mic drop after 3 months, and then you move on, and then Occlutech is the next experience. So I love that. I think in corporates, there's too many people in suits, ties, and too many people who take themselves too seriously. So yeah, I love that. And then Occlutech is the next stage, which I'm super excited to dive into. How did you come across Occlutech? What was how did you come across the business?
So one of my former investors in the biosensor company met the CEO at JP Morgan, the big conference, and he was saying, I'm looking for a CFO. And so they got in touch, and he called me, and we met at the Düsseldorf airport. And it was like in this shady cafe somewhere. And, he had like some profit and loss statements and handed this to me and so on. And I was like, okay, we need to do some work here. But the thing I was extremely fascinated by was the entrepreneurship, the mindset, and the products. I really felt the product was super solid, and there was a great story around it. So that's what made me, despite the company being in very different shape back then, really wanting to join. And I felt this spark of fire.
Awesome. What shape was the company in when you first joined? Give me a bit of detail.
It was a company being 10 years on the market, having been really great about like commercialization of their first products, and having already have a very big commercial sales footprint, which was amazing. But obviously that journey was also, full of, all the challenges you have as a small company. And we were looking for financing. And so that was one of the biggest issues, because the company had been in litigation with a very, very big American company, which turned out to be, the other side had lost every single case. And years later, we got to a global settlement agreement. But at that time, it had also drained the company quite a bit in focus, but of course also in financial resources.
Okay, right. Now let's go through the journey of Occlutech then. So you come into a company where it's got global litigation, great products, but challenges around focus. Talk me through the journey that it went on through your time at Occlutech.
Yeah, so I started as the CFO, and I must say I was absolutely captivated, right? I mean, like I said to you, the product and the people was really amazing. And at times I was so immersed in planning that I didn't even manage to shower. I sat on my kitchen table like all day, and I just started planning and started thinking and started strategizing how to do this. And all the people around me were just like this. So we were all driven by the same mission. And so my first 4 years, I was the CFO, but I started also from my previous experience very, very early on to dive into the other function and kind of get an idea about, the regulatory, the clinical, and particularly the commercial side. Like I said before, I really enjoy the commercial side. And I do think the combination of finance and commercial is sometimes not really understood, but I think it's so important that these two functions work very closely together. And so I built really strong relations with the salespeople, with the distributors, to really, have that growth and to kind of move this forward, together with the team. Of course, this is not a one-man show. So, but that was really, and we had great successes. We brought out new products. It was still the MDD times at that time, so that things were a bit more easy, but, we also executed. So that was a great time. We saw good growth. And we left the phase of all these crazy litigations, which were turned down. So it was a wonderful time.
Incredible. So you said that sometimes finance and commercial and the link is sometimes misunderstood. And first of all, who is it kind of misunderstood by? And also, why do you think it's misunderstood between the two?
Yeah, I sometimes think that both sides don't see that how closely it needs to be worked together, how closely tied cash flow, but also an understanding for our partners have to be, that you can't always just wanting to be right? I mean, of course, there are like payment terms. Of course, there is, needing to bring something to a certain hospital in time. And it's always a give and take. And I sometimes have seen that like one side has taken such a strong position in being right that they fail to see that we're on a joint journey. And to kind of have these communication, it's a lot about communication and making people talk and not just shooting emails at each other. Emails can be very damaging, but just to have that conversation, say, okay, maybe there is this crazy strike in hospitals, right? And we need to find a solution, and we are good partners, and we need to find payment terms that now suit that relation. And to look at the relation more than on like the terms, I think that's something that both sides really profit from.
Okay, understood. So CFO of Occlutech, and just before we go a little bit further in the journey, just give us an idea of what the products are so that the audience who maybe haven't come across Occlutech before understand what the company was producing and what it was making.
Yeah, so it's minimal invasive cardiac devices for defects in the heart. Most of them are congenital, so bone defects, but some you also close at a later stage, or they occur at a later stage, or be more critical at a later stage. And they get closed through minimal invasive procedure, which is great because you don't have to have an open chest surgery.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And what's what was or is the uniqueness about the product? How is it competitive compared to other devices in the space?
It's obviously the best product. I would still say that. And it has a lot of features that make it unique. And that is IP patented around the softness of the device, around the, how it gets inside the heart and how the navigation function, how it is released. And it makes it extra safe, and good for the patient, and easy and fast implantations. So that's very important, obviously, when you go into the heart and have these procedures, particularly because 50% of our customers have been pediatric patients, so kids. So you want to have that extra safety. Okay.
Excellent. And then going back to kind of the story, so we're getting to the commercial stages. You've been CFO Occlutech for a while. You're obviously eventually CEO of the company, taking over from, I believe, the founder of the business, who now is back in the CEO role. So talk me through, how did that CEO role come about? Why, like, you obviously really ingrained within the business, you were understanding the commercial, you're helping launch products with the help, like with your financial acumen as well. How did you get approached about the CEO role, and what happened there? Why did you take it on?
So I went through a phase of also being the co-CEO, and that was 4 years after I took the CFO role. And it came almost natural because I was involved in many of the functions already. And I remember it was actually the World's Women's Day when this was announced, which was particularly nice. And I need to give kudos here to the people involved and the then CEO, because I was actually pregnant with my second child at that point, and it was very obvious. So to have that guts to kind of, say, no, I'm counting on this, and you're going to take it forward, was pretty with a wide view, right? So, and that was a thrilling chapter. We had further growth, we had expansion, we had deep engagements with the physician and patients, and it was an absolutely perfect way to get accustomed to the CEO role, which obviously is not just like the internal, the operations, but also all the stakeholder management around it, with also the banks and the financials and the shareholders and the disputers and so on. So that was a great way to go in. And then later on in 2022, I became the CEO based on us also wanting to do an IPO at the Swedish stock exchange on the main list, which looked great, and we did all the preparations. But then, as we all know, the markets really turned bad, and we decided not to do that, but to do a private placement. So that was a very, very turbulent and intense time, but really we brought it home, and we weathered the storm and continued to deliver high growth. And so we were really lucky to have a revenue generating and fast growing company at that time.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
So you get to your highest on the stock market, and 2020 COVID happens. Talk us through how that affects the business. What happened when, I guess, the big disease came around?
Yeah, I think this was like the crazy time for all of us. I remember us making jokes about Corona and the Corona beer, and everything would be happy in the summertime. Little did we know, right? So I remember we went into this year like full speed. We had an amazing January, February, high growth. Everybody was like super hyper and looking forward. And then March comes and everything closes down, and we fall from like the highest high to almost nothing because we had elective surgeries and elective cases. So they weren't, they kept their hospitals beds free and weren't doing this because you can delay those patients to a later time. And then you're obviously like on spotlight with all the employees. What are you going to do? How do you manage it? Are you going to lay off? And we were really, looking into the different entities because we had different entities in different states, and started immediately to have the discussions with the governments. And I must say this was actually really a positive experience. Switzerland, where the company has its main holding, overnight transferred $500,000 for zero interest. So that was really helpful. Germany, we had an amazing relationship with our bank who helped us to get funds from the governmental side as well, because that's where we have our biggest production and where we needed the biggest support, because we could not have these people producing anymore in the rooms we had. And so, we saw March, April, May, and we kind of got really nervous. But then obviously as the summer came, the virus kind of slowed down. We saw the uptick again. And so, but it went up and down for, 18 months until we saw really solid growth again. And we didn't lay off anybody, which was great. And the people really felt like, we can do this together. It's a community. But that was obviously, again, like a really tough time when you just think you kind of now, the limit, the sky is the limit and everything is possible to kind of fall into that. But it wasn't just us, right? This was the world. So I'm sure a similar story can be told from almost any company.
Indeed. How do you kind of dispel that message? So it's so kind of reactive to something that is so far outside your control. Most of the time, like most people I've spoke to who were in business leadership positions, they didn't know and they got the message and just the same as everyone else, and no one knew what to do. But people look up to their leaders to be like, well, what do we do? So how do you kind of dispel that message? How do you like go, right, this is happening. What comes next to everyone? Here's the plan, or here's what we're doing.
Yeah, and you kind of have to find a balance between, of course, having all people safe, but continuing the business and kind of having to run this operation. I think we all learned how much can be done in home office. But I think we also learned then the years after how important it is to have people in one room and have like personal contact. So I think, it's a full loop of things, but of course everybody's like waiting for you to kind of make a statement on how things are now moving forward. You want to keep people safe, but you of course have to find a way to keep the business running. And I think we struck a good balance in doing both. And, nobody knew. So safety first, coming back to my favorite topic. And so we kind of, navigated it through and helped the people through. And we made mistakes, right? Of course too, but I think the good thing is we all got through very safe and kept the company going.
Indeed. You told me an interesting story when we prepped for this, about how that IPO preparation went and some of the challenges you had. Would you mind going into a bit of detail about that?
Yeah. So the company obviously came from a very entrepreneurial spirit and the way we were set up. And we had a steep way to get all the IPO readiness, which we were very determined to do. And we ran very fast. And it was, it's one of these things that you of course have an auditor that will audit the company. And that auditor all of a sudden felt he had a conflict. And we were at that point like weeks away from the IPO. So we get a call saying, yeah, we're conflicted. We can't do this. So we were like, okay, this is something we have to solve. On top, then our bank told us, if you don't have one of the 4 big ones, we're not going to do this IPO for you. So not only that, but also the bank putting the pressure on. Well, the big 4 we had lost one. The second one couldn't do it because he had been in the preparation. The third one didn't have the time before for this preparation. So we had like one shot. And that was quite stressful to know you have like this one call you can now make, and you either make it or the whole IPO is off. So and these things happen constantly. So the stress level is quite high at all times, right? But it's also, that's when you need to have passion and purpose, right? And you need to wake up in the mornings with that purpose to do this and to embrace all the challenges you have. And by the way, we did get the 4th auditor.
You did.
Yeah, on board.
So how does that conversation go with the team then? Is like, right, so 3 out of the big 4 have said no, and we can't do it with any of them. We've got one shot to make this happen. How do you prep the team around you for that kind of meeting and that conversation? And also, how do you approach that last person when there's almost like one shot? If this fails, the whole IPO fails, and this is what you've been working towards for a long time. So yeah, how does that feel? How does that kind of conversation go at crunch time?
Yeah, poker face, right? I mean, you go in and you say you have all the options in the world, but you really would love to work with that particular company for that particular reason, and you've always wanted it. So, you of course have to put it on and have to put on your best face and get the shower and put on some deodorant and make it sound like you're real.
Make it sound like you will. You have that poker face. You win the player. So how successful? Talk me through the IPO journey as well. So like, I'd love to find out like how the preparation goes after you've secured the bank. Like, what goes into an IPO? How does that feel? What does going on the roadshow feel like? Just give me a bit more information on that.
Very intense. It's you do hours and hours and hours of presentations. I think we did over 120 1-hour presentations. I remember we had like 1 week where every day we had 7 to 8 1-hour slots. By Friday, my brain was so toasted. I couldn't even hear myself talking anymore. And obviously you start saying the same things and you start doing the same jokes. So you can't even laugh about your own jokes anymore. They've repeated them so many times. But you kind of have to motivate yourself for every single one, because every single one is the one that, will hopefully come onto your journey. So you kind of just have to shake it off, take a quick drink and go back to do the next one in the same energy you've done the previous one. And that takes a lot. But I think it depends on the company and on what you want to achieve and what the shareholder obviously wants to achieve, or the shareholders want to achieve. For us, it was a mix of getting new shareholders in, and allowing some of the older shareholders to exit, and have access to additional funds that then could also help us for the growth phase, as we were just about to enter the US. But as I said, so we did all the preparation work. We introduced an ERP system, which has been just the nightmare everybody will tell you it is. And we have gone all the way with all the audits. We had to restate 2 years back. It was a huge effort. We wrote all the prospectus, which is quite a journey too. You have to think about like mission and vision and all these things, which you found naturally always. And then it gets all very complicated. And so, this has been a very, very intense journey. We then, as we came to after the summer in 22, things kind of were really difficult, and, from like the financial markets. And so we decided, despite having full books, that we would not ring the bell, which, came with like some mixed feelings after all this preparation, but it was just not useful. And so we decided, and we had backing of really big investors at that time that also said, look, it's probably not the right time. So let's do a private placement and then put this on the back burner for when the markets are back. So, I think, despite, that first frustration of having put all this effort in, which is not lost because it's now established and so on. But after that first frustration, obviously you realize that is the right thing, because we all know what happens after that, right? The markets went down, huge inflations, the war. I mean, there's just been so much noise around it.
Indeed. Well, it's super interesting to hear like an IPO journey and like going through that, and what it all looks like on the inside is like sometimes not what you see on the outside, because looking at it, you see people ring the bell and it's happy, and you get your stock pops on the day, and everyone makes loads of money from their shares that are exercised and things like that. But behind it, there's so much turbulence. And the more I hear about an IPO, it's like some of them just fail in that final 2 weeks where they're on the private jet with the bankers and they're flying around to all these meetings, and then it just fails and falls flat. But then also the turmoil behind it. I remember hearing a podcast on Omar's, and it was with the Mako surgical IPO, and it was just like listening to the story going through that is just, it's crazy to hear, like, and it's so different. So thank you very much for sharing that first of all. But you talked about one of the things that's kept you going is that purpose and really being in this industry. So what is it? I know we're saving lives in this industry, and we can talk about purpose at a surface level, but why is it so important to find your purpose? Why is it so important to find your passion in this industry to keep you going through those tough times? Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to go through a lot of times when you have frustration. And frustration is real, right? And it's grueling, and you have to work through it. And not more than often, you as a CEO, you will do it alone, because that's just the role of the CEO. So you have to love what you do most of the times, not every day, but the purpose and the passion is really, really amazing. And it's a great story around this, which I used to love to tell, which is, that the first race to be the first human performing a powered airplane flight. Most people will know the historical outcome of this, but the story around it is actually very fascinating, because, there was a professor at the Smithsonian, Robert P. Langley, who had every advantage. He had the education, the funding, the support, and he was poised to be the first one. But who do we remember, right? We remember two brothers, the Wright brothers, who did it. And they had none of the privileges. They had something much more powerful, which was, one, they had to succeed because failure was not an option. But two, they had passion and purpose. They didn't want to fly because, it was fancy. This event almost went unnoticed. They wanted to fly because they wanted to show that this is possible. And they had like this inner urge to do it and had to do it. So failure wasn't an option. And that's the essence of entrepreneurship, You don't waste energy on fear. You have to channel it into relentless efforts. And you can only do that with like having this passion and the purpose. And that's two very amazing, powerful forces that can help you through a lot.
Awesome. And you said about that relentlessness. Do you think that's the key to the success is being relentless and weathering the storms, or do you think it's more than that?
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
No, it's absolutely the relentlessness. You have to believe you can do it better. And my prime example of this is like the World Cup final from Argentina versus France, right? Both teams had like super elite players and perfect preparation, and they eat the best food they can and so on. But when they went onto the pit, you knew Argentina will win this because they were just so determined. And so you need that determination. And you need to have the underdog power, which is completely underestimated, I think, but you need to feel this hunger, this creativity, the resilience. And that's also how you build teams and how you work with people to have that same mission. You don't have to have the biggest resource, but you need to want it the most.
Mm. That's incredible. I do love that. And I'm obviously building a business over here, and we're trying to relentlessly build things as much as possible. And I feel like having that hunger has helped us. Like, we're still a small boutique firm, but we're doing some really cool things with a lot of companies. I think that relentlessness and just trying to be like the almost like a Jack Russell, who's like kind of barking, who won't give up, kind of won't go out without a fight. So, I love that. I think I feel that that's super important, especially in these early stage companies. We help build a lot of early stage company teams. And so when we do that, it's like looking for the people who are going to be scrappy, who aren't the polished, finished article, who aren't, as you mentioned earlier in your story, the product managers in a suit and tie. And that this is about being the scrappy dog that can just get things done, even if it feels impossible. So I love that. I think that's such a cool, I think that is the key. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned across your journey, Sabine? So you've had this really cool career and you've got a track record of success, but what's been, I guess, the most surprising or the biggest lessons you've learned across the journey?
Never, ever give up. I think it comes back to that, right? I remember very vividly one year we had implemented this ERP system. It was the last day of the year. We had zero visibility due to this ERP system not being able to produce one useful report, which drove me absolutely nuts because I'm very much in for details in like, how do we stand in sales? And I wanted to know every minute, how do we get there and how do we meet budget? So I went absolutely nuts, right? But, I called everyone, what's the number and so on. But you need to stick to it, and you need to have this relentlessness. And then also we had this the FDA process, which went absolutely not smooth. And the reason it went absolutely not smooth is because we were such an established company in Europe, and we were kind of handling this as if we were in Europe first. And while the European notified bodies can be very frustrating and bureaucratic, you are the customer. With the FDA, it's different, right? The FDA is the law. They show up in a uniform. They don't bring much humor to the job. And that is exactly how it should be. And we didn't adjust fast, but we then adjusted. And so that process dragged on for over a year. And we came to the end of 2023. And I sat in my office. Like I said, I was completely unnerved by the ERP system. I was completely unnerved by not having the results of the FDA process, which was our first approval to the market. And I just went home. I turned everything off. I went home very frustrated. I poured myself a drink and decided, I leave it all behind. That's the year. And then I got this message, congratulations, and I had no idea what this was about. And then actually the FDA hadn't closed the year without pushing out our approval. That was like the best drink I ever had. And so, it's about never, ever giving up and just being there and pushing through and believing things will happen.
Amazing. Do you think European companies going to the US get it wrong quite a lot and they don't understand that change? Or do you think that was more a internal problem or challenge that you guys were having?
So obviously it's definitely also a class 3 issue, but I think it was not all of the companies will get it wrong. I think it depends on how early on you get to the US. If you grew up with this US mindset, then I think it's much easier than having a company which is like 20 years on the market, having sold hundreds of thousands of devices. So there was no issue about this product being safe or anything. It was like more administrative issues that we didn't pull through. And I think then it's easy to kind of fall into what you have done over 20 years versus adjusting to what needs to be done in that particular country.
Okay. And what do you think are some of the biggest things that hold companies back? So, is there any common trends you spot? And the reason I'm asking this question is because you've since left Occlutech and you're currently doing a little stint in venture capital before securing your next big move. What do you see as the common things that companies are getting wrong? I guess it could be right now, but just over their time period, what is it that's not landing right now? And why do you see some companies fail versus succeed?
So one is about that really big drive in believing. The second is in having the right people in place. It's not always the founder who is the right CEO. And you will notice this very fast when you do pitches to investors. You have to adjust to the investors. And if somebody is not able to adjust to the investor world, it's going to get really difficult. And then the third thing is, I would say, it's timing. So 3-4 years ago, the world was very different. The world was looking at growth and future and selling that big dream. And you could get money for almost anything. And now it's all about profitability. And that change came very, very sudden and very hard. And I think not every company was able to adjust to it. We were obviously lucky because we are a revenue generating company. But if you only had a pipeline, this hit hard. And you really had to adjust how you think about it and which investors would come in. And the investor world is still not easy. It's not easy to raise funds, and it's been now for quite a while. So we do see some graveyards in the industry. Yeah,
definitely. And there's two things I'm going to pick up on there. So we partner with an investment banker who says that one of the most difficult things that either enables or fails a fundraise is the CEO's ability to pitch and actually win that investment. So even tough companies, even great companies with a poor CEO who can't adjust to the investors with a great technology, unfortunately, will not raise that finance. And that's one of the biggest success factors. And then the other thing, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was the second thing that we were talking about? What was the
change in the sentiment?
The change in the sentiment. Yeah. So, in regards to when there was this big, and I don't think I go as far as to say a bubble, but when there was this really big market where people were raising incredible amounts of money, it's made it even like these golden child companies where the marketing is being pumped out. It's like, these are the next big thing and it's going to be awesome. They raise on crazy valuations that mean that even if you were one of the golden companies or the golden children of 3 or 4 years ago who were doing crazy even for the time, now your valuation is so much lower because the market is simply not there to do it. It makes it such a challenging place for those companies to be, even the really good ones. So the market's very difficult. I am seeing more and more funding going into cardiovascular at the moment and lots of different cardio companies. And the other side is neuro at the moment, which is quite hot. But anyway, I just wanted to raise those 2 points. And it is such an interesting market at the moment. Are you seeing the signs of improvement? Are you feeling it getting there as an investor? Are you keeping the money for current investments and current portfolio, or are you starting to look more at expanding into new areas? And is there signs of improvement that you guys are looking at?
I think it's the everlasting optimist of, I remember the last 4 years, every JP Morgan was like, oh, it's going to get better. This year's going to be much better. We will see. Well, one thing is certain. It's a cycle, so it will come back. I don't know if it's this year, next year, or in 2 years. The boom years were also very long, much longer than usual. And I totally agree with you on the two items you say. One is you need to have a CEO who can adjust to the audience. And as I had people that didn't hardly know what the heart is and where it is and how it looks like. And you have to start at a very different point, and you need to be able to make that adjustment. And you have people that will go into the details of a clinical trial and the endpoints. And you have to be, as a CEO, also dangerous enough in these aspects to drive this. So you have to have this ability to go up and down in the depths of explaining the company. And then, yes, that has been a very, very big hurdle for many, many companies that have raised on really high valuations. And I would say it has been a bubble, right? 8, 9, 10 times revenue multiple. It's just not sustainable. And it's a very hard message to give to people that now, though the company has done very well, it's still not as much as when they have put in the money. So that's very difficult. And to come back, eventually it will come back. It's been now 3, almost 4 really difficult years. We will see, but I think, we always seen it will come back. So I think you just have to hang in there long enough to see the thing come back. But a lot of investors have held back money for their current investments so they could seek them through.
For sure. It's what we see with a lot of the investors we're working with at the moment is there's a lot of money still available for current portfolio companies, but any new investments are just on the back burner. Even though they're still taking 3 or 4 pitches a day, they're still trying to find that unicorn. It's still, and I think there's sometimes a bit of FOMO from investors when there's a really hot company, so they'll always kind of see people to have a pitch with. But yeah, it's a challenging market. I think especially for early stage R&D driven companies, it is a very challenging market. They want to move fast. They want to move quickly. They want to innovate, but the funding is just holding them back. So it's interesting. What advice do you have for those companies apart from dig your heels in, keep going?
Think about your pitch, right? And maybe have a couple of people looking at it from different stakeholders. Do ask some investors that are normally not your investors, maybe at that stage, but also to think about where do you want to bring it, and for them to give feedback on what is it they need to see to make this, to get to that stage. Maybe start early to discuss with strategics at this given point in time, because that will help you to align with them as well. And maybe you can get some early strategic money. And other than that, you just have to open every single door. That's just what it is.
Indeed. And strategics is one thing that I would like to ask a little bit further on. So, as part of our community that we run, one of the key things a lot of the early stage companies are not struggling with, but want some advice or help with is dealing with strategics. They're these big behemoths who, I guess on the outside seem like, as we say, they're the corporate warned. There's a big assumption that because they're big and because they're successful as a company and they generate revenue year over year, they kind of know what they're doing. I know that that's not necessarily the case all the time, but what I'm looking for is more the advice around how to approach the strategics, how to negotiate with them, how to kind of build those relationships. When is the right time to bring them on board? And just getting a general feel for kind of the advice you have of dealing with those strategic businesses.
So the strategics, we have a very consolidated field at this point. So it's not like you have to have 30 contacts. It's more between 5 to 10. And you can actually, they're quite approachable. Usually you will meet them at the usual medtech summits and conferences. And I've always found they're very approachable. And they, of course, also have the need to grow. And for them, growth is, 1% is billions on revenue, not tens of millions. So the scale is just bigger. So you kind of have to see what they are looking for and what stage they're in, and have an early discussion about. One is, you as a founder have to find, what is it I really want? Do I want to sell the company in 2 years, in 5 years? Do I never want to sell it? Is it going to be my lifetime project? So I think you have to kind of think about this first, and what is the shareholder and the founder's idea of the company? And then obviously, if you want to sell it, if you want to have a strategic coming in, it depends on, do you want to have it early in, which has the advantage of having early alignment, but also maybe comes with the downside of being locked. And if something happens with the strategic, or they change their mind, that might lock you in. On the other hand, again, it will give you some insight and also some access to resources. And we have seen lately, there have been some buyback acquisitions, which have been very successful. So having some alignment there. And I think also the strategics today understand that they need to maybe come a bit earlier, because the markets and the economics just not work anymore as good as they have done a few years ago. So you will meet them everywhere in all the congresses, and you should have good access if it's a topic that's in line with them. So you kind of have to, of course, evaluate what are the different strategics looking at. But I don't think you should feel shy to just walk up to them and ask them, can we talk about it? And here is what I have, and what would it take for you to A, be interested now, or B, what would be the minimum for you to think this is a hot company to acquire in 2 to 5 years? That's like, oh.
Indeed. How much do you open up the doors and give them the keys to the kingdom? Because what we're saying is sometimes the strategics want to find out what is the secret sauce, and it's like, you've got to try and we've got to try and find the balance somewhere in between. So how much do you kind of give to them? How much do you kind of share with them? Do you keep them really excited and giving them wanting more? Like, how do you kind of get them engaged with it beyond just, hey, we've got a cool technology, you've got a company who might acquire our technology? How much do you give to be able to drive that interest and keep that fish on the line almost?
Yeah, I think there's no rule to it. It really depends on what you do and how much also proprietary knowledge there is. Obviously, they will always ask for more. So I would really encourage people also to say no. And if they're interested, they will come, right? Because you don't have to give them the last detail to be interested. So there's definitely you have to bring the balance in between saying, this is what we have, but also saying this is our knowledge and we'll not share it unless we go down the road, and we'll see how things develop.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So just want to kind of bring the conversation around now to what comes next for you? What are you kind of moving towards? Where do you see the market? What's next for you, Sabine?
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, I'm an operator, right? I love people. I love products. So it's been very interesting to look behind the scenes of the investor world. But I'm basically now starting to explore new opportunities. And I'm ready to take on another company on a growth journey. And that's basically what I'm exploring right now. Having those conversations, looking at the different industries and just looking into where does my heart go next and where's my passion going next?
Understood. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been super interesting, and thank you very much for going so deep on the journey. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with, or is there anything you want to say that hasn't been discussed yet?
No, enjoy the journey. It's an amazing journey. It will cost you lots of gray hair, but if it's the right thing, you will find it very invigorating. Bring the right people on board. Bring people on board that are much smarter than you are in all the different aspects. That's what makes company grow and scale. And I think that's the fun part of it. And if anybody would like to discuss anything with me, any bold ideas, I'd be happy to have the conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining me, Sabine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of Medtech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.